Hey there, and welcome to the Mugcast, a cozy listen to pair with your coffee. I'm Hugging a Mug, a writer on Medium, and I cover everything from travel and study abroad to music, psychology, and feminism. Every week, I read one of my stories aloud with some reflections and further insights. So grab your mug, settle in, and let's get into today's piece. Welcome back, everyone. I'm so happy to be recording this again. I am actually every week so excited to go into my article and read something new. I'm not gonna lie, last week's episode was probably 1.5 hours and I cut it down to 40 minutes, which was a pain in the ass, and I think it took around 6 hours just to cut it on Audacity. It was a lot of effort, but I'm so happy to be returning to this. For this week's episode, I've chosen an article called The Modern Man Mismatch: Why Successful Women Keep Picking the Wrong Men. This is something that I've actually written rather recently. I had some trouble choosing the article because for the first 5 episodes of my podcast, I wanted to choose articles that represent all the different topics that my podcast has, which is travel or study abroad, psychology, which is something that's very dear to my heart, femininity or feminism, and music. And we've kind of already done feminism and music in the first article, and then we had travel last time. And now the last thing was psychology, and what I really like to write about is psychology in the sense of love or psychology in the sense of productivity. I've written a lot of those articles over the past 1.5 years, but I just find that I learned so many new things, and I'm so excited to read this to you because this is really like an updated piece that I'm very, very proud of, because the writing style is also something a little more special. I feel like I have different themes, obviously, like those themes that I talked about: travel, psychology, femininity, and music. Those are the themes of my articles, basically. When I write about travel, I like to write in a very narrative voice where I try to explain, and mainly I try to describe a lot of things. Then there's the informative articles, which the Sabrina Carpenter one would be one of those, and those are types of articles where I try to stay very factual. But the article that I'm reading today is one of the psychology love ones where I'm kind of making fun of things. It's a bit more of an ironic thing. The reason I love writing in this kind of sarcastic tone is because this is the type of humor that I have. For instance, Taylor Tomlinson, I love her shows on Netflix. There's a lot of really, really good stand-up comedians that I could insert here, but I love women doing stand-up. So I expose myself to a lot of that content, and then some of it gets translated into my writing and into my humor. And I showed this article to my mom and she said, "Oh, that's harsh. That's being so harsh on men." In a way, yes, it is, but the reason it is because this is a piece of irony. This is a harsh piece for a reason, because this is my type of humor. I have a very dark type of humor, and I very much enjoy writing in this very pointy tone. This article doesn't mean to point out that all men are trash. That's absolutely not the point. What I'm trying to do is to package a learning, or I guess a psychological message, in a more funny package. Because it's one thing to sit down and talk about Freud or talk about Jung or talk about Frankl and make it really serious. That's interesting in a way, but I think in the age of AI, an AI voice can deliver that content for you. Where it gets really interesting is when you're trying to pitch things with your own type of voice, with a little bit of story, a little bit of narration, and that's what I've been doing in this article. As for the article's background, I wrote it, I think, a week ago on the 12th of July, 2025. It was basically inspired by me wanting to write in this ironic voice. Sometimes I just have this ick and I really want to write something that is a little bit more jokestery and funny. And it was also inspired by me reflecting on my own experience with dating, with relationships, all of those. I'm not gonna lie, like, there's a man that comes to mind when I wrote this article. Because something I do find is that so many people online are ingesting this information on attachment styles at the moment. It gets thrown at me, and I think a lot of the shorts and breakdowns of attachment styles and how to cure your attachment style and all of these things, they are so oversimplified. There's so much more to the story, and I've really been taking my time to read papers on attachment styles and see how it influences people, and so much of it is much, much, much too simple. I just feel that all of this basic information is not quite fulfilling its purpose. I think love and relationships are such a personal issue. So I love to write from my perspective the moment that I'm seeing it in, and then love to tell my story, kind of. And the story that I'm telling here is that of me ordering a man in the mail. Kind of the perspective of having ordered something in the mail that you don't think belongs to you, and then you realize it actually does belong to you. And there's some learnings that I'm trying to implant into the article that stem from psychology, but are also very personal experiences as well. So it's kind of mixing a personal experience with some learnings that I've had from psychology over time and irony. So let's dive into it. The Modern Man Mismatch: Why Successful Women Keep Picking the Wrong Men. 3 tips on how not to order a man in the mail. And below that is, by the way, an image of this really, really cute Amazon card box character. If you haven't seen him before, he has like a triangular mouth and 2 round eyes, and he's always in the cutest of places. Absolutely adore him. So if you haven't seen him yet, Google the Amazon cardboard character. He's cute. I ordered a man in the mail. The request letter read, caring, reliable, and loving, not dashing, but just handsome enough to show significant improvement after makeover. Deep voice, humorous, and intelligent, at least a pinch of each. A week later, a package arrived on the doorstep of my classroom. The label read, N/hot for you, which didn't surprise me because my name is often misspelled. Inside the box, I found disrespect, social anxiety, and the ability to use his lack of time management as an excuse for narcissism. Finally, a mediocre look blurred by an irresistible pair of leather shoes and a white shirt. Though I didn't like the on button had obviously been pressed by nail-polished fingers before, I loved how broken he looked. Fashionable, with just enough passion to look stern, and the potential to reveal a truly fucked up past. And then there was that almost never there smile and that deep voice. Dang, he was really perfect. But the moment I turned him on, he didn't move an inch. I had to ask him to do anything at all, and soon I realized that I had mistaken his passion for leaving likes on videos of cute dogs and panda bears for care and love. Oopsie, must have been my mistake. And so, as I view the scam that I've been eyeing for way too long, I can't help but ask, who did order this? Was it really me? Or someone else? Oh, please, just let it be someone else for God's sake. That was when I embarked on a journey to find who this idiot belonged to. And more importantly, why he had ended up in my classroom only to live in my head rent-free. Attraction or care syndrome. Over a generous cup of strawberry juice, my friend recently murmured, I really don't get why we as women find men attractive. Not even their balls are. I mean, they're gross at best. And those are really all that makes them special after all. I, having seriously grieved my toxic heterosexuality, could not agree more. Soon after, I received a reel saying, if sexuality is a choice, why do heterosexual women still choose men? And it seriously got me thinking, why the heck do we? Online, most answers are simple and sexist. Women are quote-unquote hormonally primed to look for the best providers of the quote-unquote best genes. We see a tall man with muscles and hands that could strangle a bear, and our ovaries start vibrating like your phone in the middle of a meeting. And yet some women seem to sign out of this system without gynecological surgery. They argue that most of it is social conditioning, which I can only agree with. From early childhood, we readily ingest the flood of societal standards thrown at our feet. And as I've already previously stated, this conditioning determines that women have more evolutionary worth and risk than men. But it's just one of those discussions that I had with myself in the 3-hour train ride from Taidong to Kaohsiung, and I was sitting in the train thinking to myself, how crazy is it that women have to have these insane, huge life decisions in their minds from birth? Basically, we're born with these decisions Even though like our societies have changed, there's still big questions, and we're still being super judgmental on women for choosing to not have kids or have kids, you know. I recently reviewed my dreadful misdelivery, the guy question, with an international friend. After a long time of hearing stories about the content of my package, she'd finally, coincidentally, met the guy in question. To no one's surprise, he left most of the talking to the participating women. She felt the same wall of self-protection during her conversations with him, paired with a high level of ego and a low ability to empathize. Lastly, her conversation yielded no further insights, but a vague interpretation of his star signs, and a fact I already knew, that he was very convinced men and women should be friends. The misunderstanding here is, however, that he is not particularly interested in me, and I'm not particularly interested in being friends with him. I was dead set on being either everything or nothing, and for a good reason, if I might add. This reason being that no matter of him trying to hide it would obscure how obviously broken he was. A true case of a fixer-upper with lots of loose screws, but at least the walls and doors seemed to be reusable. Had he, for a split second, taken the time to not cover the holes up, he might have noticed that luck, or the devil, both are equally possible, had sent him a literal therapist to his fucking doorstep. Or him to that therapist's doorstep, to be exact. And what did he do? Run. The best learning from this talk with my best friend, who had admittedly always warned me of this package, just like everyone I know, ironically, was that she firmly kept delivering evidence for her favorite statement. It is funny how you like this guy when he literally is everything you don't want. Joke's on her, because besides him being clever and driven, which is a comment often given by documentary narrators on pigs and monkeys, nothing I'd ordered matched his description. One might thus argue that there was nothing for me to be attracted to. He's not tall, has no broad shoulders, is barely muscular, and thus not a good choice in terms of genes, so the whole biology thing is kind of disrupted. He is clever, but just enough to make himself seem intelligent, which can usually be traced back to a lack of self-esteem. He didn't seem to be more loving or caring than a peanut, but the devil is in the details after all. It turns out my request must have ended up in the I am column rather than the I am looking for category. And thus, instead of ordering a guy who was loving, caring, and reliable, I ordered the opposite. One that needed love, care, and reliability in a person to start a long process of mending broken pieces. To summarize my metaphors, here's the baseline of what I'm trying to point out. I think in a modern world of Gen Z women who have choices far beyond the 4T models we have access to, we're no longer slaves to our hormones. Our ovaries don't dictate our perception, and we can unlearn social conditioning. What fucks with us in today's society is that we provide to ourselves what men used to provide in previous generations. Instead of looking for a safe haven, quote unquote, we are one for ourselves and attract those men who look for that stable connection, who look for stable women. And don't get me wrong, there is nothing wrong with this as long as women don't start victimizing their standards for partners in favor of being, quote unquote, the bigger person, or acting like the distorted image of a feminist. To be a feminist woman doesn't mean to sacrifice your standards and provide for a man. This is just another, more creative way of serving the man at your side. A hefty sum for returns. Now I've established the following points. The package was delivered correctly, and it was, though mistakenly, ordered by me. Fortunately for me, the content, if not tended to, tries to evade by itself, and it is generally very unaware of me, meaning the guy in the box runs by himself without encouragement, but he doesn't do anything else. So seriously, how hard could it be to send the damn thing back? Let's not forget, he's one of 7 billion anyway. Turns out it is hard if said guy has cloned himself into a better version, living rent-free in your brain. Here are some interesting outcomes of research that lay the foundation for why forgetting your favorite case of a broken man might be hard. Firstly, hormonally, love in man is known to be more reliant on vasopressin, a hormone that is effective after a long time of frequent exposure, mostly multiple weeks or months. I read that it's around 8 weeks somewhere, which at some point led me down the rabbit hole of waiting around for a guy for 8 weeks because I was so fucking determined that this biological clock of 8 weeks was gonna hit, and guess what? It didn't. This is science, but it doesn't usually translate into reality that well. Thus, men might take some time to actually quote unquote love a woman, whatever that means anyway. For women, oxytocin plays an important role in falling in love, and it is triggered by physical touch, with a strong prevalence in sex and specifically orgasms. This is notably less time consuming. Physical touch should be less time consuming than 8 weeks, you know? If you don't get oxytocin in 8 weeks and he gets the vasopressin first, boy oh boy, I would run. At the same time, while studies suggest that women might be using more neural networks in generating ideas, men have been rated as more creative in self-reported scales, especially when rating their own creativity. Narcissists. So basically, the study was evaluating neural networks for women. It found that women have used more neural networks in generating ideas, and then they asked men to fill out a questionnaire rating their own creativity, and they found that comparing men and women rated their own creativity lower than men, which is funny because that doesn't say as much about their creativity as it says about their self-confidence, you know? There's two factors involved in this. The one factor is the creativity, and the other one is how highly do I view myself? How proud am I of myself? How humble am I? And I think the real baseline of the study is not really these men being oh so creative. This higher mental engagement in imaginary settings might also be related to why women have a better ability to recall emotional events and are able to retrieve more vivid memories. It is thus clear that the underlying processes in creativity in both genders differ, with women being more reliant on their emotional pathways. This might also explain why most cases of Takotsubo cardiomyopathy, and I'm going to be saying this a couple more times, also known as quote-unquote broken heart syndrome, are to be found in women. Most cases of this disease occur in elderly women who experience a sudden weakening of the heart muscle, particularly in the left ventricle, which is induced by emotional or physical stress. Such a condition can, in severe cases, even lead to cardiac arrest and thus death. Interestingly, most elderly women whose symptoms are usually induced by emotional stress, such as the death of a loved one, have a very low likelihood of dying of Takotsubo cardiomyopathy. Yet, even though men who are diagnosed are much younger, they have a significantly higher risk of cardiac arrest. Why, you might ask? Well, that is because while elderly women develop Takotsubo cardiomyopathy due to emotional stress, younger men usually develop it due to an unforeseen illness or otherwise induced stress that is directly related to their own health and their own well-being. In short, if men suffer from a broken heart or broken heart syndrome, they might actually die. But don't worry, you're not at risk of actually breaking a man's heart unless you disable them, in which case he will grieve for the life he never had and not you. In either case, it never was and never will be about you. The funny thing about this Takotsubo cardiomyopathy is I stumbled upon it because a friend sent me a reel of a male doctor, and he was very much from, I guess, a feminist point of view, trying to argue that many men die of Takotsubo cardiomyopathy. But it was very surface level. The funny thing is that he got the facts all wrong. Yes, more men die of Takotsubo cardiomyopathy, but actually more women are affected. And the reason that men get this broken heart syndrome is not because of emotional distress. It's because of the emotional distress that comes from their bodies changing or comes from an illness that suddenly they are being faced with. So it's not that men die of a broken heart. It's that men die of a weakened heart muscle because they so much grieve the version of themselves that they could have been without this illness. So basically what was so funny in this process is I got this reel from a friend, and then I went into a rabbit hole of researching this illness, the broken heart syndrome. Then I sent her a whole long text back with a summary of all the truths and wrongs and why this reel had been too simple. It's so funny because I find that happens in so many reels. So a lot of the time that's the case for anything about attachment theory. So many people throw around the idea of attachment theory online, and then they say there's the three types: secure, anxious, and avoidant. And they completely forget that there's a fourth type, which is disorganized attachment. And then it's funny how they say it happens. Some say avoidant attachment happens because of neglect. Some say anxious attachment happens because of neglect. Nobody says the truth, which is that you can't really retrace where it comes from. When your parent is clingy, you can naturally become anxious or avoidant, or you can just stay secure. A lot of the studies that are done for these attachment styles in babies happen way before any childhood trauma that you could remember would occur. So these are babies who are like around a year old or maybe 1.5, and they're put in a room and the mom leaves, and when she comes back, they look at the kid's reaction and see whether they're reacting in an anxious, avoidant, or secure way. But that, again, is far, far, far before any childhood trauma that you could remember. This story is significant for me, and I really want to tell it because it's one of those examples where you think the reel is really well done, and this is like a podcast interview with a proper cardiologist. And the fact is that he just breaks it down so simply that the main piece of the information is misinterpreted or just comes across the wrong way. Probably in the whole podcast episode, he might have done his explanations, but because it was cut down to short, the bulk of the information was missing. But I find this Takotsubo cardiomyopathy very interesting, and generally I'm a sucker for any like medical terms that kind of border psychology and medicine. I really love when something has like a biological base but is emotionally, somatically influenced. So much on reels. Be careful when you watch reels. Even the most believable people will sometimes tell you something that is not true, not because they are trying to say the wrong things or not because they're trying to lie to you. The process of breaking it down, cutting it down into short of under 3 minutes, often turns truths into lies. So because of my neurological ability to vividly and emotionally remember moments, which my quote-unquote package delivery man might have never deemed important, I can't send him back. He might not think or even remember half of our conversations, but I do. Finally, women also have a heightened ability to remember the contents of their dreams. If you wake up different women in the middle of a dream, 95% will be able to retell the story, whereas only 80% of men can. Thus, I'm absolutely positive that the man in my package who walked in through my emotional memories got stuck in my vivid imagination and built a home in my unforgettable dreams is not paying any rent. He didn't buy a ticket for the ride and yet sits in the fucking passenger seat. Front row with ample leg space. God damn it. The extinction of the handyman. And so, since the package was for me after all, and I cannot return it, all I can do is try to hide the box, kind of like a dead body, to throw in the trash later or give to a friend. I mean, in today's day and age, it would be unethical to throw away a perfectly new product. Save the turtles, right? But that means I need to order another model because I'm not one to give up easily, especially since not all my past deliveries have been trash. Some actually turned into friends, and though that is not what I ordered, at least it's a sort of recycling. But the more I look at the catalog of men, the more I realize that the selection of men has shrunk. Like, hopefully, most women, I have one man in my life who seems like a somewhat reliable blueprint of what I want and don't want in a man, and that is my dad. Hold your horses. Yes, I love my dad. Yes, I'm a daddy's girl, and yes, I'm proud of that. No, I do not want to be with a man who's just like my dad. Sorry, old pal. No, I don't find older men attractive. And no, I won't excuse myself for having the mildest standards in my choice of men based on a man who showed me actual love and care. Sorry, not sorry. Actually, I have a whole other article about why I feel like daddy's girl is like a very interesting label because it's almost a superpower in a way if you use it the right way. But what I'm trying to point out is that For many women, their dads are the most caring and loving men that they have experienced. Of course, this isn't 100%. I know plenty of women who just have a bad relationship with their fathers, and that's a personal thing. If you have a good relationship with your dad and you're a woman, then you have a nice blueprint for what to look for. It's being resourceful to try to use that man that you know very, very well and figure out which traits of him you would be able to live with and which are the ones that you can't live with at all. So what I mean when I say I want a model that is similar to my dad is that I want a man who actually gives a fucking shit about me. One who sees me as his priority and would buy me my favorite food or listen to me without any judgment. Isn't that all kind of basic? Isn't it sad that the only male reference I have for this is either my dad or my gay friends? This is not an article about toxic masculinity, but it clearly plays a role here. And while men in the past would at least silently provide by building houses, fixing miscellaneous objects, or crafting anniversary gifts with their bare hands, modern men are losing those skills. How many Gen Z handymen do you know? And how many can you count on that are Gen X or even baby boomers? My observation is the tribe of the handyman, who will be of practical use to a woman even when he's not emotionally available, is slowly drifting into extinction. The handiest of men in Gen Z that I know are engineers operating a 3D printer for Christmas, creating cookie cutters and planters out of layers of plastic. Cute, and also a gesture of love, but somehow a very different type of gift, especially because someone has to pay for the printer, and something about telling a robot to do things feels a lot more like copy-pasting rather than handmade with love. No offense. Dear 3D printer fans, I love the cookie cutters, but how about you fix my leaking faucet or paint my walls? It seems that the deal between men and women in our parents' current generation was far simpler. Women fixed the emotional availability of their husbands by admiring them while they fixed the broken leg of the chair. And voila, a happy family and a securely built home. And so today, men are less handy and seem to be in need of being a little bit more brainy. However, those men who are born into the younger generation and still rely on the idea of the handyman and provider, while not being able to deliver precisely those traits, are lost. While many women became handy enough to handle their own lives over time, men forgot to pick up the social skills along the way, which often results in a wall of toxic masculinity. So now there they are, utterly naked, a little dreadful, waiting to be picked up by a woman who will care for them enough to make them grow. And that's how I got my package in the mail. That is how many women get their men. And it's okay, as long as you're stable and able and willing to give, which, let's face it, most women are. But the truth is that probably a therapist is a better investment for the modern day woman than a man. That is what my friend said I should do. Get a therapist so I can learn to spot the green flags in an ocean of red. Attract the right ones instead of the wrong. Tick the box healthy and mature in a delivery form with confidence rather than smirking as I cross just a little broken is fine with dreams in my eyes. How about you? What will you order next? Careful, life is stingier with returns than Amazon. Okay, that was it. I personally had a lot of fun writing this. I spent a lot of time editing it too, because I wanted to make the jokes that I did make even pointier. I even had a moment of sending this article to a friend of mine and asking her to read it and checking it. I'm very happy with the way that it is written. I hope some of the humor comes across in me telling it on the podcast. I hope this article gave you some inspiration and maybe some learnings, or at the very least, you just had a good time listening. Thanks for granting me access to your ears on the Mugcast. You can read more of my work on Medium at huginamug, or follow me on Instagram via the handle hugin.amug for cozy content and updates. I also have a publication called Wonder Woman, spelled with an A, where I try to post articles about travel and study abroad. Don't forget to follow the podcast and share it with fellow coffee lovers, and tell me which article I should read next in the comments, either below the podcast or on my Medium. I hope you had a nice cappuccino with this article, and I send a warm hug from my mug to yours. Bye bye!